Fear. One of the things I hear the most from mentees is around fear. Well, I'm afraid to make calls. I'm afraid that it's not going to work out. I'm afraid that I'm going to make a mistake. So first, recognize that you will fail your way to success. Everyone who's accomplished anything has usually been a tremendous failure in a lot of ways. Not every call is going to go the way you want it to. Not every interaction is going to go the way that you want it to go. You will make mistakes. Just understand that. You'll learn from mistakes. One of the real values of the QLA system that Dan put together back in the 90s is the addition of the dream team and then being sure you secure top flight accounting and legal representation. Why? Because those people can help you, especially when you're beginning a journey and you're inexperienced, in making the mistakes that they've seen made hundreds, if not thousands of times, so they can save you that process. But I'd encourage you to think back on the things that have happened to you in the past that you've been afraid of. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe it's jumping out of an airplane. I don't know what it is. But most of the time, what you're afraid of and your expectation of why you should be afraid is far worse than the actual event itself. Usually if somebody is petrified of giving a speech, let's say Toastmasters, they end up thinking about that for days, if not weeks in advance. Every time they do, they feel anxiety. They're nervous, but they go ahead and do that Toastmasters speech. And oftentimes the results are much, much better than they ever dreamed. And they say to themselves, geez, what the heck was I afraid of? So I'd encourage you to remember, too, something Dan has said and I've said many times. Fear, false expectations appearing real. Most of the time, what you think is going to happen that you should be afraid of really doesn't materialize. And if you think back on the events that you've been afraid of in your life, most of the time, they turned out to be a benefit, not something that you truly should be afraid of. One of the beauties of being young when you're doing QLA is you don't have a lot to lose, financially anyway. And most of the time when people say, well, yeah, what the heck, if it all goes, I don't have any assets, maybe you have a car, you usually don't have a house, so your risk tolerance is also much different, and you can take advantage of that. So it's a really important lesson. I'm going to play for you a audio from a speech that Dan did back in the 90s where he talked about me and talked about an observation I had with respect to fear. And I think it's important to listen to this and then take it to heart and remember that fear is false expectations appearing real most of the time. Another thing that's critically important, follow the QLA steps that Dan laid out back in the 90s. Most people who don't do that end up wanting to jump to a deal immediately before they have the value of that dream team and professionals around them. And that usually lets them make mistakes that could have been saved and usually doesn't end well. So follow the steps. It's one of the most important things that I advise people of, is that those steps are there for a reason. They've worked. The success is obviously evident. And so make sure you take advantage of that. If you don't know what the steps are, you can go to my site. You can go to Dan's site. And the best training I've done on that is the boot camp recordings, brucewhipple.com/deep dive boot camp. And it's about 12 hours of training, following the steps, what templates to use, et cetera, et cetera. So I would encourage you to do all of those things, but remember most of all that fear is usually false expectations appearing real. So on that note, I'm going to include the audio from Dan's speech in the 90s.
The objective, to replace fear with passion. That should be your objective moving forward. And as my good partner Bruce Whipple would say, I'm increasing my risk and stretching my comfort zone on a daily basis. Risk doesn't scare me anymore. I have replaced fear with faith. I find the two emotions can't exist at the same time. And I agree, and I couldn't agree more. And for those of you, a couple of you have met Bruce. Bruce is my for the lack of a better term, clean-up hatchet man. He goes into business ventures that for whatever reason go wrong, and they always go wrong, and he fixes them. And that's what he does, and that's what he does very well. He looks at a problem, like if during the bombing of London during the war, he'd look at this, he'd be climbing over the debris with Churchill and say, God, what a great opportunity for an engineer here. Geez, I can't believe, look at all the stuff we got to rebuild. I just look at all the damn rubble and God, what all the headaches. To him, the glass is always half full and not half empty. And by the way, if you're ever in business with me and you see Whipple walk in the door, it's because you're walking out the door. Just remember that. It's because you're exiting. Because he doesn't come along to pass you on the bum and say, what a good job you're doing. He's there to cut your heat off.
Okay, so if you've got any ideas for future podcasts, I'd love to hear those. You just go ahead and email me at bruce@brucewhipple.com. And if you go over to brucewhipple.com, go ahead and grab the free class. It's brucewhipple.com/free class. I look forward to hearing from you. And remember, this is QLA's time. There is a lot of free information you can use to acquire already profitable businesses. This is Bruce Whipple. Thanks for listening to the Business Acquisition Podcast. And remember, you miss 100% of the opportunities you fail to take. And procrastination truly is the thief of time. So do something today, please. Your future self will be proud of.